A distant CEO unexpectedly steps into fatherhood when the woman he cherished passes away following the birth of their daughter. Once a solitary figure, he now transforms into a genuine father. Chicago, 11:48 p.m. The whiskey in the glass remained untouched by warmth. It lingered in Edric's grasp, remaining untouched for almost 15 minutes. Soft amber light danced within, gently flickering from the quiet glow of the television. Without music, the party felt incomplete, merely the distant, muted rhythm of a city that appeared to thrive beyond the confines of his penthouse. Fireworks erupted in the sky, bursting into sudden flashes of red, gold, and violet. The distant sound of car horns echoed beneath, while in the adjacent towers, shadows danced, figures of joy, affection, and life unfolding. Edric remained motionless. The only motion was the subtle flicker of his thumb against the chilled crystal glass, as if he had momentarily lost the knowledge of how to occupy his hands. He reclined, allowing the leather of the sofa to envelop him. His dress shirt remained pristine, the top button casually undone. The space enveloping him was pristine, nearly devoid of any warmth. A residence designed to dazzle, crafted for appearances, never for living. He leaned in and placed the glass on the pristine marble coffee table, its surface so polished it mirrored his fingers, which he then withdrew. In the background, the HVAC whispered its rhythmic hiss, turning on and off. The gentle creak of the wooden floor underfoot served as a reminder that, even in this stillness, time continued its relentless march forward. He cast a fleeting look at the hallway, where the door to his home office remained firmly closed. 3 missed calls appeared on his personal phone, resting face down. He had left it untouched the entire day. His assistants understood the unspoken rule of leaving him undisturbed on New Year's Eve. Yet, with each passing year, the silence seemed to weigh more heavily on his chest, making it increasingly difficult to breathe. He dragged a hand down his face and rose, moving to the window, his forehead resting softly against the glass, the chill penetrating his skin. From this vantage point, he could observe Millennium Park, the arc of Lakeshore Drive, and the grid of streetlights shimmering like miniature stars. Individuals gathered below, united in spirit, clasping hands, raising glasses, and exchanging vows. He breathed out gently. They have no idea what they're committing to, he mused. His eyes wandered. Across the skyline, one window glimmered with the soft glow of candlelight, while another sparkled with Christmas lights that still clung to the edges. His gaze lingered on a corner balcony 3 floors down, where a man cradled a child in his arms, accompanied by a woman whose laughter filled the air. He averted his gaze. That existence did not belong to him. Then the landline rang, not the cell. That one had been malfunctioning for hours. The landline, the one that hardly anyone was aware of, was there. He pivoted, a scowl forming on his face. For a brief instant, he simply gazed at it. It perched on the brink of his kitchen counter, resembling an artifact from another time, something that felt out of place. The phone rang once more. He made his way across the floor, reaching for the receiver with deliberate slowness. "Indeed, Mr. Harris." The voice was distinctly female, exuding professionalism, neither icy nor particularly soothing. "I am reaching out from St. Mary's General Hospital. I apologize for reaching out at this late hour, but this matter is quite pressing." Edric's grip on the receiver grew firmer. "It seems there has been an error." "There is absolutely no error, sir. A baby girl arrived into the world tonight at 10:43 p.m. Olivia Bennett has identified you as the father. I regret to share the heartbreaking news that she did not survive the labor." The chamber swayed. His hold faltered. The world continued its relentless pace, yet within him, a stillness took hold. "Could you repeat that?" His voice felt foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. "This likely comes as quite a surprise. Miss Bennett provided your complete name and contact information. You are the sole next of kin listed in the records." He pivoted from the counter, deliberately, as though the act itself could alter the truth of her statements. His heart pounded once, fiercely, as if issuing a caution. "It's been years since I last saw her," he murmured, mostly to himself. "Excuse me, may I inquire if you are available to come in this evening? The infant is in stable condition, yet arrangements will need to be made. Lila is her name." The soft click of the call ending lingered in the air, a subtle and gentle sound. Edric remained frozen, the receiver pressed to his ear, his mind blank and his body still. Olivia. He hadn't spoken her name in ages, and it felt strange, yet her face returned to him in an instant, her eyes, that half-smile that always seemed poised to share a joke. The manner in which she uttered his name when she sought to pierce the barriers he had attempted to maintain between them. She had vanished. And at that moment, a child appeared. His offspring. He placed the phone down with great care. His hands remained steady. They were far too chilly for such a thing. He strolled over to the hallway closet, slipping on his coat with a leisurely ease. He retrieved his keys from the tray by the entrance. For the first time, he felt uncertain about what awaited him beyond the door. Yet he ventured out regardless, and the door clicked shut behind him. St. Mary's General Hospital, 12:31 a.m. The corridor extended infinitely in a stark white, punctuated solely by the gentle hum of fluorescent lights that flickered above like a far-off swarm. Edric's shoes produced a soft cadence on the gleaming linoleum, each step measured and intentional, as if his legs had lost the instinct to respond to his will. A nurse guided us forward, her words drifting into the sterile atmosphere, swallowed by the profound stillness that enveloped the hospital at this late hour. He found it overwhelming. Not at this moment. The scent enveloped him initially, a blend of disinfectant and plastic, with a subtle hint of latex and a sweeter note, reminiscent of baby lotion's powdery essence. He couldn't determine whether that was a reality or a figment of his imagination. His hands stayed tucked away in the pockets of his coat, as if they were unwilling to step into this strange, surreal world. To his right, a baby cried out. The noise cut into him, sudden and unrefined. The nurse halted before a frosted glass door labeled NICU, authorized personnel only. She turned to face him, her expression soft yet weary, as though she had shared this kind of news countless times before, and it never became any easier. The nurse spoke gently, reassuringly, stating that she was stable, breathing independently, and exhibiting strong reflexes. That's a positive indication. Edric nodded, uncertain of what response she anticipated from him. Truths had yet to settle within him. They rattled at the corners of his thoughts, akin to coins jostling in a vacant compartment. The nurse presented him with an item encased in a transparent plastic sleeve, a hospital-issued envelope. Before you meet her, she mentioned, there's something the mother left behind, just for you. He grasped it firmly with both hands. It seemed weightier than it ought to be. His fingers lingered at the seal, quivering ever so slightly, a sensation he was acutely aware of, prompting him to grip tighter. Not at this moment. He pried the envelope open. Inside, carefully folded, lay a single page of lined stationery, her handwriting unmistakable, still round and precise, as if she always penned it with the expectation of someone else evaluating it. Olivia. He stood there, reading the letter, his breath coming in shallow gasps. No grand declarations were made. Free from remorse. Only Olivia, with her unadorned and unwavering truthfulness. If you find yourself reading this, it signifies my absence in expressing these words vocally, and that truly frustrates me. Yet, I was aware that this could occur. I want you to be aware. Lila was intentional. She was the one I selected. Decided to embrace her. Decided to embrace her love. I am familiar with you. I remember the person you once were, long before everything changed. The man who grasped my hand beneath the glow of a streetlight, his fear of losing me evident in his touch. I have a strong feeling that he remains in that place. Embrace the moment. She requires that side of you. Not the ideal one, just the truthful one. Halfway out from behind the letter, another slip of paper had slipped free. Ripped from a notebook, ink blurred at the corner, unmistakably hurried. Less is more this time, concise and to the point. If you are perusing these words, she has successfully reached you. Strive to surpass your previous self. Dedicated to her. Ah. He carefully folded the paper, taking his time with each crease. Not because he had finished, but because he wasn't prepared to face it any longer. The nurse remained silent. I simply waited. She then extended another item. A delicate, gentle blue wristband. She mentioned her identification tag. The inscription on the band was initially too faint for him to decipher. He brought it nearer, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the shiny surface. His gaze lingered on the name. Lila Bennett. December 31st, 2024. The letters twisted his stomach into knots. Bennett, not Harris. Indeed, it was the name, Olivia's. Yet, it was more than merely a name. It was an omen. A delicate, hushed barrier stood between him and the child who lingered just beyond the door. A sign that he was absent. That he had been inconsequential when it mattered. She had made arrangements to nurture Lila on her own. He wrapped his fingers around the band, with a tender touch. The nurse gently pushed open the door to the NICU. Within, everything transformed. All things converged. Softly muted illumination. The steady cadence of respirators. The subtle hum of purified air. Lines of miniature incubators shimmered softly, resembling distant stars in the night. He trailed behind her quietly until she came to a halt next to one by the window. She is present right now. Edric moved in closer, and then his gaze fell upon her. Lila. She lay nestled in a gentle pink swaddle, her tiny head fitting just within the span of his palm. Strands of dark hair gently framed her forehead. Her skin radiated warmth and had a delicate translucence, reminiscent of gossamer silk. She remained still. Simply inhaled, with calm consistency. The subtle rise and fall of her chest was almost undetectable. Silence reigned, devoid of melody or lyrical introduction. Only the soft, solitary beep. 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 Beside her, the monitor emitted a rhythmic pulse, a steady drumbeat that seemed to take the place of his own heartbeat. He remained motionless. Excessively quiet. Throughout his extensive career managing companies, orchestrating improbable deals, and navigating negotiations with precision, he had never experienced such a sense of vulnerability, such a feeling of being unarmed. Lila was unaware of his identity, indifferent to it, yet here she stood, alive, thanks to a woman who had once held faith in a version of him that even he had long since lost sight of. He leaned in cautiously, resting both hands on the rim of the incubator, uncertain if such an action was permitted. His breath hitched as her delicate fingers stirred. Though her eyes remained closed, her hand, a tight fist, moved slightly. Edric instinctively slid his index finger beneath the edge of the swaddle. Lila's hand reached out to him. It enveloped his finger gently yet firmly, and in that instant, the distance between them vanished. He held back tears, not quite weeping, yet something flickered in his gaze, intense and foreign, as if every identity he had constructed, every facade, every shield, had abruptly fractured. She clung to him, not out of familiarity, but simply because he was present, and that sufficed. A week later, Edric brought Lila to the penthouse. The elevator chimed gently, signaling its arrival at the penthouse floor. Edric emerged, cradling Lila in his arms, the bulky hospital-issued carrier dangling uncomfortably from his shoulder. The doors glided shut behind him, enclosing them in a realm that now seemed overwhelmingly vast. The silence enveloped the space, an unsettling stillness that lingered in the air. His penthouse, pristine and sharply designed with stainless steel and slate gray, appeared almost sterile now. Vast glass walls unveiled the skyline as his footsteps resonated on the sleek concrete while he traversed the living room. The echo of his footsteps, the gentle whisper of Lila's swaddle, those were the sole sounds that filled the air. She remained calm and composed. Not at this moment. She lay in slumber once more, lips parted just a touch, her breath gentle and warm against his chest, still cocooned in the worn scarf that had once belonged to Olivia. It was not a typical case. The hospital staff remained silent as they wrapped it around Lila, like a gentle whisper enveloping her. Edric knew it at once. Pale lavender wool, frayed at the edges, carrying a subtle scent of the lemongrass soap Olivia had favored during the summer. He had overlooked that fragrance until it resurfaced, lingering on this worn fragment of her. He longed to reveal Lila, to envelop her in something fresh and pristine, yet his fingers hesitated. The scarf was the sole item her mother had ever used to envelop her. Taking it away felt like severing a bond he had no right to disrupt, so instead, he folded it with care. He left it there, simply placing it on the bookshelf in the hallway, on a shelf that had remained vacant for years. There was an unsettling quality to its presence, as if it were an intruder in a space meticulously arranged and emotionally distant. Yet she didn't, nor did he at this moment. The nursery was far from what one would expect a nursery to be. Once, it served as a guest room, and later transformed into a reading room. The room lay empty, its cold hardwood floors echoing the absence of life, while the blank walls stood as silent witnesses to forgotten moments. A crib lingered in the corner, its assembly still incomplete. The instruction manual lay sprawled on the floor, its pages worn and neglected. Edric was still in the process of assembling it. Instead, he had obtained the bassinet from the hospital. The plastic frame and soft mesh sides appeared rather inferior when set against the lavish backdrop of his penthouse. Yet, it was the sole option prepared. He gently placed Lila inside, carefully adjusting her head with tenderness. She shifted gently, emitting a quiet sound of discontent, yet soon found her peace again. Edric took a step back and remained still. He was uncertain about what he was anticipating. A certain signal, an intuition that eluded him. He glanced at the baby monitor twice, tweaking the small camera as though it would somehow change anything. The stillness of the room hummed in his ears. Then the initial wail emerged. It began softly, a tentative whimper, and then surged rapidly into a piercing, high-pitched wail that resonated throughout the entire apartment like a siren. Edric recoiled. It exceeded his expectations in volume. Lila's cheeks flushed crimson, her limbs twitching beneath the blanket's embrace. He hurried back to the bassinet, uncertain of where to place his hands. All right, he murmured, attempting to maintain his composure. I have arrived. He raised her as he had observed the nurse do, supporting her under the arms, mindful of her neck. But Lila's body arched, and the cry intensified, ascending into a sound that was sharp and nearly indignant. He swayed her gently, moving with a subtle rhythm. Come on, please, he paused. His voice trembled. He was completely unaware of what he was inquiring about. Nothing seemed to come together. Her wails intensified. Her legs broke free from the swaddle, one sock tumbling to the ground. Edric gazed at her delicate foot, quivering, rosy and chilled, resting against his suit. A wave of despair washed over him, constricting his throat like a vice. He settled onto the floor, Lila cradled in his arms, his back resting against the wall, positioned beneath the enormous clock that loomed overhead, each tick resonating with a pronounced click that felt almost like a taunt. Tick, tick, tick. Every moment served as a stark reminder of his diminishing time and grip on the situation. He attempted to modify his grip once more. She writhed and cried out more intensely. And then there was a voice. Could I? He raised his gaze. Margaret lingered in the doorway, in her mid-50s, dressed in practical attire, a canvas bag casually draped over her shoulder. Her presence was one that flowed effortlessly, neither hurried nor imposing, but simply existed. Edric's eyes fluttered open. She just keeps going. Margaret gave a single nod. She feels a gnawing hunger, probably compounded by fatigue. He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Then, in silence, extended Lila forward. Margaret's hands remained calm and assured as she cradled the baby. The change was immediate. Lila's wail diminished, then broke into soft hiccups. Margaret held her gently, moving at a measured pace around the room, whispering softly, nearly beyond hearing. In an instant, the weeping ceased. Edric gazed intently. It was devoid of enchantment, lacking any deception, it simply flowed with comfort and recognition. She glided with the ease of a seasoned performer, and Lila surrendered to her embrace effortlessly. A peculiar warmth slithered up the nape of his neck. It was more than mere relief. It was truly remarkable. Something unsettling. Envy. He felt a sense of shame about it. As he observed Margaret cradling Lila, calming her as if it were the most instinctive act imaginable, he experienced a profound sense of alienation within his own space, a man witnessing a bond unfold through an invisible barrier he could not breach. Margaret pivoted, presenting a faint smile. "Allow me to look after her for a while. You seem like you could benefit from a moment of pause." He gave a slight nod. "Thank you." He remained in his seat as she strolled away, down the corridor, Lila nestled peacefully in her embrace. The cadence of her footsteps dwindled into the stillness of the apartment. Edric gazed at the scarf resting on the shelf, then shifted his attention to the clock. Tick, tick. He dragged his hand slowly down his face. His home had always been quiet, always been cold, always been tidy. Now it was a trio. And somehow, in the midst of it all, it resonated with a vibrancy like never before. Yet he had never felt more out of place within it. The morning light crept gently into the apartment, as if hesitant to intrude. It streamed through the expansive windows, creating elongated shadows on the polished marble floor. Edric stood barefoot in the kitchen, a bottle in hand, swirling warmed milk in smooth, practiced circles. He had discovered the precise temperature the previous night, following 2 unsuccessful tries and one notably piercing scream from Lila that reverberated like a verdict against the glass walls. Margaret had demonstrated the method for testing it on his wrist. Neither too warm nor too chilly, she had remarked, directing his hand. He recalled how her voice conveyed not commands, but gentle invitations. He never sought assistance, that was not his way, yet she offered it regardless. He cradled Lila in one arm, the bottle positioned just so. She sipped with ease. Her delicate fingers grasped the hem of his shirt. He remained uncertain whether he was on the right track. Yet, she held back her tears. That sufficed. At this moment. Later that day, he found himself at the doorway of the guest room, now hers, a towel casually slung over his shoulder as Lila nestled gently in his embrace. The modest inflatable tub that Margaret had arranged rested on the floor, partially filled. Steam ascended gently, twisting gracefully toward the ceiling. He gently lowered her. The water lapped at her legs, causing her to startle, her arms flailing in surprise. A soft whimper slipped from her lips. "Hey, it's all right," Edric murmured, his hands quivering just a bit as he cradled her neck and back. "Only water, there's no need for concern." Yet, the fear did not belong to her, it was his to bear. What if he let her go? What if the water was excessively warm? What would happen if she lost her footing? What if something so straightforward transformed into something permanent? He had dedicated his entire life to understanding risk, yet nothing could have equipped him for this moment. Bathing a child so small, so impossibly soft, she felt more like a whisper than a presence. As he extended his hand for the towel, a glimmer of intrigue captured his attention. A subtle crimson stain traced the inner curve of her wrist. It lacked depth. Probably from the identification. The band around his stomach felt a bit too constricting, causing a twist of discomfort within him. He caressed it softly, his thumbs skimming lightly over the surface of the skin. Her skin remained flawless in every other area. The smallest bruise on her body loomed large, a whisper of danger, a hint of inadequacy, an invitation for uncertainty to flourish. He scrutinized every detail, from elbows to knees to ankles, leaving nothing overlooked. Only a single subtle mark. Yet, There was a moment when something within him became unyielding. "If anyone hurts you," he murmured, almost to himself, "they'll have to get through me first." Lila gazed up at him, her eyes wide and unfocused. He was uncertain if she had heard or grasped the weight of his words, yet in that instant, he spoke with the conviction of someone who had never shielded anything before and now found himself with something precious that he could not bear to lose. He enveloped her in a towel, gently drying her with care. She murmured gently, nestling into the curve of his neck. Her warmth penetrated the fabric, anchoring him in the moment. An hour later, he found himself in the living room, her form cradled in his arms as they swayed softly by the window. The phone vibrated with a sudden buzz. An unfamiliar number. He responded impulsively. "Mr. Harris." The tone was succinct, courteous. "This document pertains to child vital records. We are in the process of completing the birth certificate for Olivia Bennett's child. We simply require verbal confirmation." Edric felt a constriction in his chest. "The name we have chosen for the child is Lila Bennett. Are you affirming that you are the father?" He remained silent for a considerable moment. His mouth parted, then sealed once more. The name Bennett reverberated within his mind like a tolling bell. Olivia's name, her legacy, her struggle. Yet, he was present at this moment. He gazed down at the infant cradled in his arms. She lay in slumber. Her fingers grasped his collar as if they were old friends, a connection that felt timeless. "Indeed," he remarked, the word breaking softly. "Indeed, I am her father." A silence enveloped the conversation, followed by a note of gratitude, and then the connection was severed. He gazed across the sprawling cityscape. It had transcended mere nomenclature. That evening, Margaret assumed the late shift. Edric sat at his desk, the overhead light casting a gentle amber glow around him. The form lay open on his tablet. Birth certificate. Mom, Olivia Bennett. Dad, Edric Harris. He moved his finger down the screen with deliberate slowness, absorbing every detail as though the significance could shift at any moment. Finally, he arrived at the signature line. He grasped his pen with purpose. His hand remained steady as he inked multi-million-dollar agreements. It remained steady as he eliminated whole departments to save on percentages. Yet it trembled now. Not aggressively, just enough to sense it. Understanding that this signature transcended notions of power or control. It was a matter of yielding. He gazed at his name after it had been inscribed. Edric Harris, alongside Lila Bennett. Two names, intertwined through lineage, through words, through intention. He placed the pen aside, reclined in his chair, and exhaled a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Relief was nowhere to be found. Just the burden of his recent actions. Unclaimed. Unrescued. However, it was accepted. For the first time in his life, he had affixed his signature to something that was immutable, unalterable, and devoid of any embellishment. Something that went beyond merely defining her. It shaped his identity. He entered her room later that night. She lay in slumber, her mouth slightly ajar, arms lifted as though grasping for something elusive, even in the realm of dreams. He bent down toward the bassinet, gently brushing her cheek with the back of his finger. "Lila," he murmured. Her eyes briefly opened, a fleeting moment of awareness. In that instant, an unvoiced connection lingered between them. Her lips remained uncurled. She remained composed. Yet, her gaze was fixed upon him. And that sufficed. Yet the nights elongated like taut strings. Slender. Buzzing softly. Strained. Edric had long since lost track of them. Not in a sentimental or lyrical way. In the actual sense. Somewhere between the third and fourth sleepless night, his phone's calendar ceased to be a helpful guide and transformed into a cruel reminder. Alarms buzzed with a precision he had once admired. At this point, they had lost all significance. Lila wept for a long time before the bell rang. He no longer required reminders. At 2:07 a.m., Edric was already alert, as the monitor flashed a crimson hue. The muted echo of her plea seeped through the speaker, filled with urgency and uncertainty. He tumbled off the couch, the blanket still clinging to his legs, and quietly made his way barefoot into her room. The hardwood felt icy against his feet, yet his body flowed with instinctive grace. The throbbing joints. The tension in his neck. The subtle, unyielding pulse lingering behind his right eye. These had turned into fixtures. Lila was already squirming as he leaned over the bassinet. Her legs thrashed, fists clenched fiercely, expression twisted in fury. "What is it, then?" he inquired gently, his voice rough from a slumber he couldn't recall. Yearning, emptiness, profound uncertainty. She cried out with increasing intensity. He extended his hand toward her, with a newfound assurance compared to just a week prior, and held her gently against him. She struggled, filled with doubt. He initiated the gentle sway that had turned into his signature move. Shift to the left, then to the right, moving in harmony with the gentle drone of the air conditioner. The bottle rested upon the warmer. Excessively warm. He muttered a curse, struggling with the lid. Steam billowed, searing his thumb. He let the cap fall. Milk cascaded across the counter. In the distance, Lila's wails reached a crescendo. The clock struck 2:19 in the early morning hours. By 2:22, he found himself on his knees, one hand busy with the cleanup, while the other struggled to keep her from slipping off his shoulder. The milk cascaded onto the bottom edge of a post-it on the fridge, causing the paper to warp and bend. He realized it when it was already too late. What are the steps to effectively sterilize a bottle? Don't forget to let it cool down before serving. The ink had blurred across the page. His handwriting, typically precise and deliberate, appeared as though it belonged to someone unfamiliar. Additional notes were strewn throughout the kitchen and hallway. Release a burp between ounces. Inspect the neck for any drool. If the temperature exceeds 99.5 degrees, please contact Margaret. Some were coming undone. Some were stained with formula, while others were burdened by the hasty placement of coffee mugs. One clung to the back of his hand throughout the night, unnoticed until Margaret brought it to his attention. He was coming apart at the seams. Yet remaining steadfast. He was evolving. Perhaps not in the best way. However, sincerely. At 3:08 in the morning. He finally provided her with sustenance. She sipped reluctantly, then succumbed to unconsciousness mid-suckle. He hesitated to make a single move. He lingered by the bassinet, slightly hunched, feeling her warm breath against his forearm, her fingers gripping his shirt with a firm hold. That morning, as she gently soothed her through yet another episode of fussiness, Margaret reached out with a call. "I believe she has a slight fever," he said hastily, getting straight to the point. "Not elevated. However, I require guidance on the next steps to take." A silence lingered in the air. Margaret's voice remained unwavering. "Was her skin warm when you touched it?" "Indeed, but I don't believe it's fully flushed." "Perhaps I'm overthinking," he paused. Silence enveloped the scene. "I believe my daughter has a fever," he said once more, this time with a deliberate slowness. Increased confidence. It wasn't merely the words that resonated with him. They emerged effortlessly, devoid of consideration, stripped of any facade. Similar to the way our bodies remember movements. He didn't refer to Olivia's daughter, nor did he mention the baby. He mentioned my daughter. He ended the call after considering her suggestion. Warm bath. Hold her near. Observe. Lila drifted off once more on his chest, her fever subsiding. As the sky started to glow, infusing soft orange hues into the steel-gray horizon, Edric felt a deep weariness coursing through his body. It had been 2 days since he last showered. His t-shirt was reversed. He had stepped into a puddle of formula, and hadn't even bothered to change his socks, yet Lila was breathing softly. Her tiny hand, nestled within the curve of his collar, moved gently with the rhythm of his breathing. He perched on the edge of the couch, gazing intently out the window. No news channels. No email. Only the gentle pulse of vehicles passing beneath. The flickering taillights of a city that had never stopped since her return. He started to hum softly. Merely to remain alert. It was a melody that had slipped from his mind for ages. Once, Olivia would sing while she cooked. A band that performed in that gritty bar they once adored. The melody held neither cheer nor sorrow. Simply put. Recognizable. He repeated the same melody endlessly. Subsequently, he infused the narrative with additional words. Silently. Softly spoken. He remained oblivious to Lila's gaze until his eyes fell to the ground. She gazed upward, her mouth agape, her eyes filled with wonder and intrigue. Then, almost unnoticed, her lips began to curl. A grin. An authentic one. Not the ephemeral reactions they cautioned him regarding. His breath hitched. The world remained unchanged. No violins were played. No ray of sunlight illuminated her flawlessly from above. Yet within him, a fracture occurred. Not as a wound, but rather as a window. A flicker of warmth in the frigid dwelling he'd constructed around his existence. Her lips curved into a smile. Upon him. And he returned the smile. Not with victory. Not with arrogance. Simply, relief. He inclined his head and pressed his lips gently against her forehead. "That's the first time you found amusement in my presence," he whispered. "I ought to feel insulted." She fluttered her eyelids. Her delicate hand nestled against his chest. The clock struck 5:01 a.m. When she drifted off once more. For the first time since bringing her home, Edric felt a sense of calm instead of dread at the thought of the next cry. He was aware that it was inevitable. In half an hour. Perhaps a bit less. Yet he would be present. For he had gained clarity at last. Lila wasn't shedding tears in his direction. She wept as she spoke to him. And that changed everything. The dawn broke, unfolding like countless mornings before it. However, today appears to hold an air of the extraordinary. A headline was the beginning of it all. Edric overlooked it at first. Margaret entered the kitchen, silently setting the printout next to his coffee while he struggled to burp Lila over his shoulder. The infant emitted a moist hiccup. Edric gently massaged her back, then looked down. Edric Harris, a billionaire, and the mystery surrounding his secret daughter. Initial images within. Under the headline, a blurred image captures him cradling Lila by the window, her head nestled against his chin, her form wrapped in the lavender scarf that was once Olivia's. The mug in his hand remained motionless. He perused the piece once, then a second time. The phrases were unwelcome, partially accurate, and crafted with a hint of believability that made them feel perilous. Lila had no name, merely referred to as the infant or the enigma of a child. However, they had chosen the name Olivia. They discussed her passing, pondering the timing of it all. A cropped image of Olivia from years past was even included, her face rendered stark by the grain, rendered anonymous by the passage of time. Margaret stood in anticipation, hoping he would finally break the silence. He did not. He rose to his feet and gently lifted Lila into the nursery, the door softly clicking shut behind him. By noon, his phone had chimed 17 times. The team responsible for public relations. 2 reporters he hadn't communicated with in ages. A woman asserting her affiliation with People. A piece from Forbes. Next, the written words. By 2 p.m., the photographers had taken up residence outside the building. He observed them via the surveillance feed. Dark SUVs with shaded glass. A man perched atop a van, wielding a zoom lens that stretches longer than his forearm. One of them donned a delivery uniform. One feigned the act of walking a dog. Edric switched off the feed. He moved from room to room, inspecting each curtain meticulously. Each and every lock. Each pane. Margaret observed in quiet contemplation. That evening, he received an email from security. A confirmation had been sold to the press by one of the building's night guards. Indeed, there's an infant up there. That was all it required. A handful of words. Several $1,000s. The guard was dismissed. Edric requested a meeting with him regardless. They lingered in the lobby after hours, tucked away in a secluded corner where the watchful eyes of cameras could not penetrate. The man appeared more youthful than his memory suggested. Faint. Apprehensive. Fidgeting with his hands. "I had no intention of causing any harm, sir," he stated. "I never anticipated it would grow to this extent." Edric remained silent. He made no threats. He posed a single inquiry. "Speak softly, with a steady tone. Did you consider her before you accepted the money?" The man remained silent. There was no obligation for him to do so. In the following 3 days, the world beyond became frenzied. The evening air was filled with the hum of drones skimming past the windows. Notes were discreetly passed to doormen by the reporters. Messages poured in from charities, influencers, and unfamiliar faces asserting their connections to Olivia. Individuals eager to share her narrative. Several individuals requested interviews. Some provided legal counsel. A book deal was being offered to him. Edric overlooked all of it. Instead, he muted his phone. Missed calls. Meetings have been cancelled. He has blocked off his schedule for the month. He delved into his thoughts. It was Margaret who first caught sight of it. His shoulders, which had once stood tall even in weariness, were now perpetually tight. He lost his composure when the microwave chimed. As the baby monitor emitted a soft click. As the doorbell chimed twice within the span of an hour. Unexpectedly, a friend from his university days, someone he hadn't been in touch with for 6 years, appeared unannounced at the concierge desk. Edric warned them to ensure it never occurred again. He called off the deliveries. Guests were declined. No correspondence. There are no housekeepers available. No cleaning services available. The penthouse transformed into a stronghold. And Edric, the guardian he has chosen for himself. He lingered in the air. Above Lila's crib. Above the cameras. Beyond the drapes. At night, he stood with arms crossed, gazing at the skyline with a quiet intensity, as if challenging the city to attempt to steal anything more from him. One afternoon, he started to outline his escape strategies in a notebook. Leasing an additional property. Transforming personas. Relocating to the seaside. A location adorned with trees. Less company around. Reduced visibility. He revealed nothing of it to Margaret. Yet, she perceived the indications. In a quiet moment of the day, with Lila peacefully asleep and the sun casting a golden hue over the hardwood floor, Edric found himself lost in a dream. Not quite in slumber. More like dozing off in the chair beside her crib. Fatigue enveloping him completely. Within the dream, he found himself outdoors. Amidst a throng. Flashes of light erupted all around. The world ablaze with sound and chaos. He embraced Lila tightly against him. Yet, tears streamed down her face. Yelling, truly. Despite his firm grip on her and his frantic navigation through the throng, the cameras continued to flash incessantly. The faces remained distinct. Her cries grew more intense, a primal roar, until the sound enveloped him, drowning out all else. He attempted to cry out, to wail, halt. However, his voice failed to function. He awoke abruptly, the stillness around him piercingly intense. He awkwardly entered her room. She was present. In slumber. Inhale. Exhale. Forever his. He lowered himself to the floor next to her crib and remained there until the light shifted. As the evening unfolded, he found himself once more sifting through the security footage, swiftly advancing past yet another monotonous day marked by shadows meandering near the parking garage, when Margaret made her quiet entrance. She simply walked in. She never inquired. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder. He stiffened, a reflex rather than a sign of defiance. She expressed softly that what she needs is a father, not a superhero. He pivoted in her direction, deliberately. His expression remained a mystery, yet his shoulders sagged in defeat. After a pause, he admitted, "I can't protect her." "Not quite. Not from any of this." "No one is able to," Margaret stated, "but you can certainly be present. That's the moment that will stay with her." He gave a slight nod. It may have been small, yet it held authenticity. That night, Lila shifted restlessly, the sound of another helicopter buzzing above her like an unwelcome intruder. Edric approached her room, lifted her silently, and transported her to the most distant chamber in the penthouse. The most serene nook. There are no windows. He cradled her against his chest, the rhythm of his heartbeat unwavering. Beyond the walls, news blared, whispers swirled, and engagement soared. Within the confines of the room, Lila lay in slumber. And Edric, ever vigilant, his breath in harmony with hers, realized something he had never understood before. He might forfeit wealth, he might sacrifice his legacy, he might relinquish control. Yet, this delicate pressure against his ribs, this gentle breath on his collarbone, this soft sigh, it was the first experience that rendered the outside world less significant than the one he held close. And for the first time in ages, he allowed the clamor to dissipate, focusing solely on the sound of her slumber. One afternoon, as Edric rummaged through papers in search of a tax document, a tedious bureaucratic task, he unexpectedly uncovered a small, bent postcard that slipped into view. The edges were turned, the ink a touch worn. He gazed at it intently. A watercolor depiction of Portland's drizzly skyline. The type you might encounter at a fuel station. On the reverse side, a well-known flowing handwriting. Whenever you seek a moment of calm, you know where to reach out. Emma, 7 years prior. He did not respond. He lifted the receiver and entered the numbers. Emma made her entrance 2 days later, her coat drenched from the February drizzle, a brown tote slung over one shoulder, and a bag of groceries clutched in the other. She appeared just as he recalled. Partially disordered, gaze-aware. A woman who draped her past around her shoulders like a well-loved denim jacket. As she entered the penthouse, she hesitated. This location has an aroma reminiscent of a candle being lit in a corporate setting, with an optimistic expectation for the outcome. Edric released a quiet chuckle, the first in several days. You always had a knack for establishing the right atmosphere. Emma's eyes wandered to the bassinet by the window, where Lila rested peacefully, lost in slumber. She approached without hesitation, leaned closer, and softly said, "Hi, little one. You can't even begin to comprehend the impact you've had on this man's defenses." The meal that evening was crafted with care, a heartfelt interpretation of solace on a plate by Emma. Warm chicken soup, bread crisped to perfection, a salad generously coated in dressing. Edric made an effort to assist, yet he primarily found himself mincing the garlic excessively and scorching the rice. They showed no concern. The kitchen lights glowed with a warm, golden hue. Lila lounged in her bouncer seat, emitting soft gurgles that hinted at a blend of amusement and indifference. Edric endeavored to offer her mashed sweet potatoes, but he missed her mouth on several occasions. A blob plopped onto the table. He let out a deep groan. Emma nudged a napkin in his direction, a playful smile on her face. A billionaire faces defeat against a mere 4-month-old. I feel privileged to experience this moment. He grinned. I've navigated through challenging deals, intense boardroom battles, and arbitration sessions in Hong Kong, but this is the toughest negotiation I've ever faced. Because this one truly holds significance, she murmured softly. A moment of silence lingered. The soup simmered gently on the stove, releasing a warm, inviting aroma. Lila swung her feet playfully. Edric gazed at his cousin seated across the table, the girl who had once pilfered his pencils, who had tended to his split lip back in middle school, who had known him before he donned the armor, before the wealth, before the solitude. He sensed a gentle easing. After dinner, Emma cradled Lila in her arms and strolled through the living room, a soft hum escaping her lips. Lila, still half asleep, stirred gently, then opened her eyes, and in that brief moment of quiet, her tiny hand reached out to caress Emma's cheek. Emma paused, then beamed. Edric remained motionless in the kitchen, gripping a dish towel, observing intently. Something peculiar stirred within his heart. He remained silent, yet his smile was sincere and effortless, like a dormant muscle finally coming back to life. Later that week, Daniel reached out. Once a close companion from my college days, now embracing the joys of fatherhood with 3 little ones. He had come across the photos online but had not made any effort to connect, until a mutual friend informed him that Edric had begun to pick up his phone once more. In a secluded bar nestled within the basement of a charming boutique hotel, they crossed paths. The decision made by Daniel. "Here, you can find solitude," he remarked, and the bartender remained silent, never prying. They engaged in conversation for 2 hours. Daniel described parenthood as a blend of battle and awe, intertwined seamlessly. "There's no manual," he remarked, cradling a beer, "just intuition and endurance. You believe that sleepless nights are the ultimate struggle, yet it's something deeper than that. It's the awareness that you're perpetually just a breath away from unraveling it all." Edric gave a slow nod. His glass remained undisturbed. "You're accustomed to having the reins," Daniel remarked, "but this brings you down to earth quicker than any setback ever would." "Indeed," Edric remarked, "it truly does." They parted without a farewell embrace. That wasn't the nature of their friendship. As Edric was about to walk away, Daniel called out, urging him not to vanish once more. "You're not alone in this journey of discovery." A week later, his laptop chimed, signaling a Zoom call. The name displayed on the screen caused his breath to catch in his throat. Marissa, his past collaborator, a reflection of his drive, a competitor in quietude. She departed from the company 5 years prior, noting a difference in creative vision. Edric had not uttered a word to her since that moment. He responded. She emerged on screen, barefaced, clad in a hoodie, with her hair tied back. She appeared as though she hadn't rested in days. "Hey," she remarked nonchalantly. "I hear you finally embraced your humanity." He blinked, then let out a chuckle. "How kind of you." "I didn't call to discuss business," she added. "I just wanted to extend my congratulations, not for the baby, but for enduring through it all." A moment of silence lingered. He gave a slight nod. For 20 minutes, their conversation meandered through the realm of trivialities. Faded recollections, foolish errors. The moment they nearly chose a name for their company that would have been quite cringeworthy. Then she said, "Let's make sure to stay connected this time, okay?" "I shall." He truly meant it. That evening, Edric found himself in the nursery, with Lila peacefully resting against him. The gentle hum of the baby monitor, the sporadic groan of the floorboards beneath him. He reclined in the rocking chair, gazing out at the shadowy, vacant skyline. She stirred in her slumber, her fingers curling around the hem of his shirt. He murmured, "You are unaware of this." "Not at this moment. Yet you rescued me from a version of myself I never realized I despised becoming." The words emerged raw, subdued, sincere. The next morning unfolded quietly, yet an undeniable change lingered in the air. In the kitchen, Margaret savored her tea at the counter as Emma busily loaded the dishwasher. A toy for a baby rested on the floor. A dish towel draped gracefully from a cabinet. It may not have been flawless, but it certainly had a comforting warmth to it. Edric entered quietly, his feet bare against the cool floor, holding Lila close, her head nestled against his neck. He surveyed the surroundings of the room. For the first time in years, maybe even for the first time ever, he experienced a sense of companionship. He felt more like a figure adrift, grappling with the weight of a home, a story, a heritage. He experienced the sensation of being a man enveloped in a space that at last resonated with the warmth of belonging. Lila stirred and let out a yawn. Emma extended her hand to playfully tickle her chin. Without uttering a single word, Margaret passed Edric a pristine bottle. The morning light enveloped all three of them. A fresh dawn breaks. And at last, a family. After much contemplation, Edric resolved to take action on something he had long neglected. Today, he would make his way to Olivia's resting place. He lingered at the door, time stretching beyond necessity. The lavender scarf rested on the hallway table, meticulously folded, receiving more attention than any piece of clothing had ever warranted in his residence. It wasn't elaborate, merely a piece of worn wool, frayed at the edges, yet it had embraced Lila on her very first night in existence. It had previously been in the possession of Olivia. It was the very first thing their daughter had ever learned about her. Edric carefully tucked it away in the inner pocket of his coat. He forgot to bring flowers. That seemed insincere, lacking depth. However, the scarf. This held significance. The cemetery lay still, enveloped in a silence that only the chill of winter can bring. Moist soil. Desolate branches. A stillness that felt more like a pause than true peace. All that lay beneath was poised for a resurgence, eager for the moment to flourish once more. The gravel crackled underfoot. Only a solitary figure traversed the rows of stones, a woman in the distance, bent and deliberate, kneeling beside a grave. A cluster of fading lilies rested next to her. Olivia's plot lay at the rear, nestled beneath a slender dogwood tree that had long ago lost its foliage. The headstone stood out, unadorned and gray, its freshness contrasting with the older stones surrounding it. No elaborate engraving. Only her name. Her time. And beneath it, a brief line he had not selected. Embraced love without restraint. Embraced authenticity. He lowered himself into a crouch. The wind pulled at his coat, attempting to snatch away the stillness. He remained silent for a moment. I gently retrieved the scarf, unfolding it with care, and placed it delicately at the foot of the stone. It danced briefly in the air before finding its place. He whispered, "She needed this more than I did," as he smoothed the corner down. "Yet now it belongs to you once more." He settled onto his heels, his gaze following the intricately carved letters. He finally admitted, "I wasn't sure what to bring. Flowers seemed foreign to our essence. You never seemed to favor the choices I made, regardless." He breathed out, the mist of his breath dissipating quickly in the chill, his fingers pressed into the moist earth, not with force, just enough to anchor him. Apologies escaped his lips, a quiet admission of his shortcomings, a recognition that he could have done more, sooner. The phrases lingered, unrefined and visceral. I continually believed I would find the opportunity to address it. I believe we both did. I was certain you would be present, that there would come a time, eventually, when I would be prepared. Yet, life moved on. His voice faltered for a moment, he chose not to push it ahead. You were correct, by the way, regarding me, regarding Lila. His eyes wandered to the tree above, its bare branches reaching toward the sky. I believed that love needed to be acquired in precise amounts, demonstrated, and confined. Yet, you offered it freely, despite my unworthiness, and now, at this moment, I'm discovering the way. A faint rustling sound came from behind him. Edric pivoted. The woman he had noticed before was now nearer, just a few feet away. Her coat, crafted from soft wool, featured a charming plaid pattern, while her gloves were delightfully mismatched. She offered him a subtle, gentle nod. "Apologies for the interruption," she remarked, her voice tinged with the weariness of years. "Sometimes, it's comforting to realize that another soul is engaging with the quiet as well." He offered a weary smile. This is my inaugural visit. She approached with ease, undeterred by the chill in the air. In her hand rested a moist tissue. Initial encounters can be challenging, she remarked, then cast her gaze toward the tombstone. He belongs to you. Indeed, Edric remarked. Then, a pause. The woman gave a nod. She retrieved an item from her pocket and extended it toward him, a pristine tissue. You keep speaking to them, she said gently, even when they fall silent. He acknowledged it with a slight nod. She lingered only briefly, her hands softly resting on his shoulder before she turned and made her way back down the gravel path. Once more in solitude, Edric leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. A memory surfaced, unhurried and unwelcome, he and Olivia beside her car, the storm drenching her red dress. She had just spoken, though the words escaped him, yet her eyes lingered in his mind. Her eyes had longed for him to respond, to stand up for her, to select her. He did not. I was too proud to heed the advice. He murmured. You were simply too exhausted to say it again. His hands clenched the fabric of his coat. The wind surged once more. A crow cawed from the heights, its voice echoing briefly before falling silent. He extended his hand, brushing against the polished surface of the headstone. His hand lingered in that place. Thank you, he expressed, for having faith in me beyond what I ever managed to believe in myself. A solitary droplet of rain descended, gentle and unexpected, resting on the back of his hand. He paused, then exhaled, a sound that was almost a chuckle. Indeed, he remarked, looking up briefly. I understand. He lingered for a bit more, silent, simply existing in the moment. Before he rose, he took one final action. He pulled out his phone, capturing a moment without angles or filters, just a single photo, the scarf, the stone, her name. He named the image Lila, Mom, saved it, and secured it. Not for today. Yet, there would come a day when she inquired. Upon Edric's return to the car, he found the engine had grown cold. He lingered in silence for an extended period before finally beginning. He felt no sense of lightness. Closure wasn't merely a threshold you crossed and abandoned. It resembled a window more than anything else. At times, you cracked it open just wide enough to invite the fresh air inside. Yet he had expressed the essential truths, and she had absorbed them in the sole manner available to them. As he drove away, the rain began to fall, not in torrents, but with a consistent rhythm. In the back seat, Lila shifted slightly in her slumber, her breath steady, a reminder that she was still present, still with us. In honor of Olivia and all single parents, Edric established the Olivia's Light Foundation, dedicated to offering medical, legal, and psychological assistance to single-parent families throughout the United States. The name originated from Emma. They occupied the lengthy oak table in the dining room, the very one Edric had previously employed to entertain investors and board members. Now it was adorned with paper, notes, printouts, staff bios, zoning regulations. He dedicated the morning to proposing names that exuded clarity, refinement, and commercial appeal. Fresh Perspectives. The Second Start Initiative. Haven operates effectively. Emma remained silent. She simply bided her time. As he took a moment to enjoy his coffee, she discreetly pushed a folded piece of paper in his direction. Written boldly in the middle, in her recognizable handwriting, were 3 words. Olivia's Radiance. He gazed at it intently for an extended period. Remained silent. That night, in solitude within the study, he inscribed the name 5 times, each iteration more deliberate, more confident. And by the 5th, he realized he wouldn't refer to it in any other way. The workspace lacked the sleekness of glass and chrome. He had no desire for that. The structure was a vintage library, transformed into a unique space in the South Loop. Sturdy walls, elevated windows, beams of sunlight casting long shapes on the ground. He selected it for its sense of warmth, security, as if it had been sustained more by affection than by mere materials. Edric traversed every inch of it, not in the role of a CEO, but as a craftsman. He gauged the space for the playroom, settled into the corner designated for the intake area, and cautiously opened each creaky closet door. At one moment, he knelt down and traced his fingers over a weathered baseboard, softly saying, "We can fix this." Margaret beamed from the threshold. She would appreciate that. They looked beyond mere qualifications in their hiring process. Edric was adamant about attending every interview. He meticulously examined each resume, including those with errors or incomplete qualifications. The team noted his attention when a woman entered, in her early 30s, a former nursing student, a single mother who had left her studies during her second trimester, and lacking recent job experience. Throughout the interview, she maintained a poised posture, her hands clasped neatly in her lap. Her voice remained calm, yet her gaze darted toward the door, as if preparing for an imminent dismissal. Edric inclined his body, eager and attentive. "What if you were in Olivia's shoes?" he inquired. "What do you think would have been the most essential thing for you?" The woman blinked, taken aback. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. She stated that she didn't require any sympathy. "I long for someone to recognize my significance." A heavy silence lingered in the air between them. Edric then gave a slow nod. That afternoon, he eliminated 3 other candidates. Flawless resumes, refined responses, devoid of emotion. On the day the doors swung open, Lila dashed through the office without shoes, a marker clutched in one hand and a half-eaten cracker in the other. The space was incomplete, with furniture only partially put together, the welcome desk still awaiting a coat of paint, yet it felt undeniably authentic. Individuals began to gather, helpers, mothers, infants nestled in slings and nestled in strollers. As Edric knelt to fasten Lila's shoe, she let the marker slip from her grasp and scampered over to the glass wall of the main conference room. With a playful smile, she placed her hands on it before glancing back at Emma. "Mother," she said, gently rapping on the glass. Edric stood still. Emma lifted her gaze, softly. "I believe she's referring to the drawing." On the opposite side of the glass, a fresh doodle emerged, 5 crayon suns, a blue squiggle labeled home, and a stick figure with a circle in its belly. Lila radiated joy and gestured towards it. Mother's home. During a tranquil hour that morning, while Edric was engaged in a call, she had captured it on paper. Until this moment, it had gone unnoticed. An intern approached to take it down later, believing it to be mere childish clutter on the company glass. However, Edric intervened. "Let it be," he said. "It is meant to be." News traveled fast. By the second month, the intake list had increased significantly. Thus, the contributions were received. Edric was determined to keep the foundation's growth in check. Each expansion was deliberate. Each recruitment felt intimate. He explored shelters, engaged in conversations with social workers, and cradled infants as their mothers completed paperwork. He left the cameras behind, refrained from making speeches. Yet he paid attention. He arrived. Gradually, the pain within him, the one shaped by Olivia's departure, started to diminish. For the first time in ages, he found himself not merely responding to loss. He was constructing from it. As the afternoon waned and the rain softly tapped on the windows, a young woman entered through the front door. She donned a weathered hoodie, her old sneakers drenched, cradling a slumbering infant in a tattered gray sling. Her hair was gathered haphazardly, a rip in the elbow of her sleeve. Yet her gaze remained unwavering. Edric noticed her before the receptionist had a chance to. She refrained from moving toward the desk. She lingered just within the threshold, swaying gently, her gaze sweeping across the room. As Edric drew near, she remained composed. She gazed upward, weary yet filled with a sense of accomplishment. "Is a letter from someone necessary to demonstrate that I am worthy of assistance?" she inquired. Neither begging nor blaming, simply inquiring. Edric felt a constriction in his throat. Olivia had requested so little, had borne so much in solitude, had declined to plead with the world for the space that was rightfully hers. He gazed at the young mother, and he truly perceived her essence. It's not only about the likeness, but also about the bravery. He paused before responding, merely offering a nod. You're exactly where you need to be, he murmured gently. She let out a single breath. And for the first time that day, a smile graced her lips. As twilight descended and the final family departed, Edric found himself wandering the empty halls in solitude. He halted before the transparent barrier. The crayon drawing remained, now smudged and sun-faded, yet still holding its form. Below it, Lila had drawn a new figure, smaller, beside the stick figure labeled Mama. It sported jagged strands for hair. Edric beamed with delight. He gently traced the new figure with a single finger, murmuring, "Daddy's home too." Another year has passed, and here we are on New Year's Eve once more. The penthouse had lost its former charm. The once harsh steel and stark glass had been transformed, rugs now warmed the floors, vibrant finger-painted canvases adorned the hallway, and in the living room, a charming wooden train set meandered beneath the modest pine tree, draped in a whimsical array of mismatched lights. The walls carried fresh tales of the past. Images, a multitude of them, some elegantly displayed in frames, others affixed with tape in a chaotic manner. Lila is on the rug, crawling with a sock playfully tucked in her mouth. Her initial gummy grin. Her fingers curled gently around Edric's thumb. A blurred photograph capturing her slumbering on his chest, the contour of her face mirroring Olivia's, positioned just above the dining table. A spontaneous moment captured by Emma, one that Edric initially overlooked, featuring him and Lila sharing a laugh, her arms wrapped around his neck, hair playfully obscuring his face. He had never witnessed such a smile on his own face before. He strolled through the apartment barefoot, a bottle of sparkling cider in one hand, observing as people filled the space he had once dreaded would stay empty for eternity. Margaret gently mixed a comforting concoction in the kitchen. Daniel and his wife sat on the rug, their legs crossed, as they constructed towering block structures alongside their children. Marissa stood by the stereo, perusing playlists as Lila clung to her leg. Emma stepped out of the nursery, clutching a collection of stuffed animals, her laughter ringing out as Lila zipped around the couch, squealing in triumph. The dwelling resonated with a cozy vibrancy, filled with a sense of home and connection. Edric rested against the doorway, taking slow sips, allowing everything to wash over him. Authentic, understated, simply genuine. Later, as guests savored their desserts and children dashed around the dining table, Emma spotted him on the balcony, arms crossed, gaze wandering over the skyline. "She's quick," she remarked, moving closer to him. "She is," he answered, his tone gentle. "It never ends." "She's a reflection of you," Emma remarked. He took his time before responding. "Then, she's better." Emma observed him for a moment, then remarked, "You know, you keep saying that Lila saved you." Edric tilted his head, intrigued. "But she didn't," Emma continued, her smile soft and inviting. "She offered you the opportunity. You're the one who turned back." He gazed down, observing Lila through the window as she twirled with a sparkler in her hand, leaving trails of light in sweeping arcs. "I still don't know what I'm doing." "No one does," Emma replied. "But now you care enough to try. That's the part that matters." As the clock approached midnight, the lights softened, and individuals started to meander toward the balcony or the windows. A bottle was uncorked prematurely, sending champagne foaming over the counter. Laughter filled the air. Children scrambled onto laps, couches, and shoulders. Edric lifted Lila effortlessly, cradling her in his arms. Her eyes were wide with wonder, yet the effects of too much sugar and play had begun to weigh her down, leaving her in a dreamy state, softly humming to herself. He made his way to the balcony, keeping her snug against him. The winter air nipped at his cheeks, yet she nestled against him, warm and gentle, radiating a sense of calm. Then the countdown commenced. 10, 9, 8. Lila blinked slowly. He pulled the hood of her sweater closer and pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head. 7, 6, 5. From across the room, Emma lifted her glass in a toast. Margaret acknowledged her with a nod from behind the kitchen island. Meanwhile, Marissa was busy counting alongside the kids. 4, 3, 2. Edric gazed down at the city, aglow in gold. 1. The sky erupted. Not with sound initially, but with vibrant hues. Splashes of crimson, gold, and electric blue filled the air. Then came the rumble, deep and slow, reverberating against the buildings. Lila gasped, her small fingers clutching the collar of his shirt. "Boom," she whispered, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Yeah," Edric replied softly. Boom. More fireworks erupted, illuminating the sky in vibrant waves. Reflections twirled across the glass towers, scattered in a myriad of directions. The city pulsed with energy. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling her relax against him. Then, almost instinctively, he murmured, "I was lost once." She didn't raise her gaze, simply burrowing further into him, her face hidden beneath his chin. "But you provided me with a guide I never realized was essential. You showed me that new chapters can emerge from closures, that not everything shattered remains in disarray." The next explosion illuminated the horizon in shades of rose gold. Lila let out a soft yawn. He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "Thank you for finding me," he whispered, "and for showing me how to start anew." Lila remained silent. There was no need for words. Instead, she offered a gentle smile in her slumber, resting her head comfortably against his shoulder. In that fleeting moment, enveloped by joy, brilliance, and the resounding bursts of fireworks, time paused. No lingering regrets. No more pondering the possibilities. At this moment. At this very instance. At the serene, undeniable awareness that certain loves do more than mend you, they reconstruct you, from your core outward.